College Football 26 comes out in less than a month, but some people have already started playing it thanks to EA Sports beta codes that they have been giving out. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over some of the things that those testers have put online about stuff that's confirmed in the game, as well as just some other key points. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. The first thing is actually something I've talked about for a while that I was disappointed wasn't in 25, and that is dynamic lighting. And for those of you who don't know, that just means the sun sets throughout the game. You know, it changes the shadows, it gets dark if you start a game around 7 p.m. And another thing they added is that it depends on the month that you're playing in. So a game at 5 p.m. in September is going to be much brighter than a game at 5 p.m. in November, as well as when the sun sets and stuff like that, which I think is super cool. I also think it'd be super cool if they did it based on the stadium location. You know, if you're playing at like Florida versus at Minnesota, then you get different daytime hours, but I understand if they couldn't do that, and I'm not really sure if they implemented that. Next is something smaller, but definitely a welcome change. It's that quarterbacks can now juke in the backfield when holding right trigger. So that means, you know, you have your playmaker with right trigger, but that's when you're not, you know, sprinting. When you are, you get to juke out those defenders, which helps, you know, get out of pressure. But it can get maybe a little confusing. You know, if you're trying to do playmaker, you screw up, you maybe juke into a defender, but I guess we'll just have to get used to that. The next two are about sliders, and the first one is that Wear and Tear now has sliders for how each individual hit will affect it. So basically, you know, you have your blocks, you have your hit sticks, you have your regular tackles, you know, catch tackles, stuff like that. You can now change that in settings to affect wear and tear exactly how you want it to, which I think is super cool and a good change for realism, because people can create sliders now that are, you know, as realistic as possible in terms of injuries and stuff like that. The next one just says that there are sliders for how precipitation, so rain or snow, affects catching, pass accuracy and strength, broken tackles, and kick accuracy and power. So, you know, your basic settings, now those are affected by participation, and you can actually use sliders to affect how much it actually does. The next one, the poster says they really don't know much about it, but somehow auto subs are tied to wear and tear, so you can probably change in settings. You know, when the starters get this tired, you know, sub them in. You could probably change it by position, stuff like that. So I guess we'll just have to see how that works. And then the next one says that you can view a national champion history, conference champion history, and award history, which is something that you couldn't do in 25 and people were confused. So I'm glad they're just adding that as an easy add, and now you can see that history. You know, I think once you play, you can see the history, and then also real life history. The next one says the depth chart was actually overhauled. They say that stuff like, you know, RELE, MLB, OLB are changed names now with just R-Edge, L-Edge, Mike, Will, and Sam. So not that huge of a change, but it's just something. And then there's just some more stuff about how the positions are changing with packages. I don't think that stuff is important enough to make the cut in this video, so I'm gonna keep going, but just you'll figure it out when you play the game. Dynasty sim stats were overhauled, which is something that people complain about so much. You know, you're simming games, you're playing games, you know, those other games, you just see crazy stats that are completely unrealistic. So it sounds like they fixed that. There's so much more 1,000-yard rushers. That's what the poster says. They also say that they counted the number of total pass attempts versus total rush attempts, and the balance is much better, which is a good thing because that system was completely broken last year. So I'm glad they put in some effort to fix that. The poster also says that most teams were in the 55 to 65% passing range, with, you know, the rushing teams having a lot less. And unlike College Football 25, which for those of you who don't know, it was about 75% passing for all teams, which is completely unrealistic. Another thing you might have noticed in College Football 25 is that quarterbacks are just having crazy seasons, with seasons where they throw like 50 touchdowns and 2 picks. So it sounds like that's fixed. There's a lot of more quarterbacks who are throwing, you know, less than 30 touchdowns, around 10 interceptions, which is a lot more realistic, and it's a decent quarterback for college football, which, you know, happens in real life a lot. So I'm glad they fixed it in this game, and there's no more just crazy seasons that we would have almost every year in College Football 25 Dynasty. I just want to put something in here too. The poster did say there was an explicit disclaimer saying that the sim stat tuning is not finalized, so assume that this stuff will be similar, but maybe not exactly the same, although what this poster is saying sounds pretty realistic, so I hope they don't tweak it too much. The poster also said that the transfer portal is definitely overhauled, which they didn't really go into much detail about just because there's a lot of things going on and it's obviously the beta, so it's not finalized. But they also said that the speed is fixed. So last year there was so many players that had crazy speed. It was so easy to get a full room of just super fast players. Now it sounds like they're capped a lot more. High school players aren't coming out with 95 speed anymore. They maybe get 85 or 90 on the high end, but they said that's definitely fixed. Another thing they mentioned is that you can now manually progress players in Dynasty, which sounds like a good thing at first, but the poster says it's super tedious. You have to go through like 4 menus, and then it doesn't even feel like it's worth your time. So doing that for every player, it sounds like there's a point system, but doing that for every player would just take too much time, and they said that they would rather have the AI do it. So hopefully we get some sort of streamlined, user-friendly version of that, but maybe at the end of the day, you just upgrade your quarterback how you want, and then all the rest of the players, you can kind of just let the AI do it for you. In Dynasty, you now have protected opponents that you can choose. You can have 1 or 2 in-conference opponents. You can't choose which week you play them, but you can protect them so that you play them every year, which is something, and I guess it's an upgrade from last year. There's also something that says there's a season health bar for each player, but the poster doesn't really know what it does. It's something maybe to do with wear and tear, but we'll probably see more about it once they get into the deep dives and stuff like that. Another thing that's already confirmed is the formation subs, which is something that obviously people complained so much last year that we didn't have formation subs. So another thing that's pretty easy to add, and I'm glad that EA took the time to just, respond to the fans a little bit and do what they wanted. So yeah, now we have formation subs, so those people are all happy. And that about does it. There's a lot of things to unpack here. There's a lot of great things that, EA is doing. It definitely feels like the developers are tapping into consumers more than any other sports game really, and doing what they want. I mean, there's just some things like formation subs I just mentioned that people complain, and now they're doing it. So it gives people a reason to buy the game every year, as opposed to something like 2K where people complain and then they just change something else that no one asked for, and people still buy it, but at the end of the day, you're trying to please the consumer. And I think EA Sports developers, specifically for College Football 26, are definitely trying their hardest to do that. So I'm very thankful for them. I also wanted to go over a couple of comments just on this post, maybe some extra things to tell you guys, so I'll go ahead and do that. Something they didn't mention in the post, but they did mention in the comments, is now face masks can be sorted based on the helmet that you are wearing, as well as toggling that setting on and off. So if you want to see all the face masks, you can, but now you can just say, I want to see, face mask for the Speed Flex, and then you have all your options, which is definitely just a quality of life improvement. It has nothing to do with the gameplay, it just makes it easier. And it was kind of frustrating looking through gobs of face masks for one that fits your helmet, when in reality only a couple of them actually do. So I'm glad they added it, but once again, I'm surprised it wasn't in 25. Another thing you might care about: punters are now the default holders instead of the backup quarterbacks like last year. And then there is a rating for long snapping, which most linemen will have, tight ends will have, so teams will just use whichever player has that highest rating, even if it is bench warmer or whatever, which is different than last year. With that being said, that's everything you need to know about the beta version. After all, everyone that got a code only gets access to play now in Dynasty, so no Road to Glory, obviously no online, no really creation, anything like that. So it's kind of the bare bones beta, but it did tell us a lot of information that people are interested in. So with that being said though, thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and I will see you in the next one.